David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We've got a big show today, but I did want to get one sort of quick story in before we get to a bunch of other stuff that we've got planned for you today. We have learned that a judge who sentenced fracking protesters to outrageously harsh sentences actually has family ties to oil and gas firms. Just a coincidence, of course. This is in the UK. I'm talking about Judge Robert Altham, who jailed 3 fracking protesters at a quadrilla site, the first environmental activists known to be put in prison for public nuisance since 1932, with sentences of around 15 months each. It has now been revealed that the judge's family is connected to oil and gas. Listen to this. The Altham family has a business which supplies the Irish sea oil and gas industry. His family is part of the supply chain for the huge energy company Centrica, which has invested tens of millions of dollars in fracking. And the judge's sister previously wrote an open letter in favor of fracking, saying that it would create jobs. That same sister of the judge and the judge's parents run the company supplying the fracking industry called J.C. Altham and Sons. And one interesting question that has come up in all of this and in thinking about the fairness of these sentences is the question of, were these peaceful protests? They certainly weren't violent, but the protesters did end up, in addition to just demonstrating, climbing on the roofs of trucks that were taking drilling equipment to the fracking site. They refused to come down from the roofs of those trucks for somewhere between 45 and 84 hours. So it's not violent, but there are critics saying, you know, if you get on top of company vehicles, make it so that they can't move, it may not be violent, but it's sort of over the line from peaceful. I don't really know exactly where the line is between a peaceful and a violent protest. Definitely, this is not violence. And there's actually a law in the UK around judges making these sorts of personally impartial decisions, which says that a judge's impartiality can be questioned if family members are politically active or have financial interest in the outcome of a case. Seems like both apply here. The judge's sister writing an open letter in favor of fracking is political activity. Having a business that supplies the oil and gas industry in the context of fracking is a financial interest. And so now, as a result, the lawyers for the protesters are trying to get the sentences totally overturned. If they succeed, the protesters could be set free within weeks. And this is, we've talked about this in the United States. It's also happening in the UK. It has to be taken way more seriously than it is. So the micro question is, do you overturn a particular sentence? And then you've got to look at, here's what the sentence was. Here's what sentences tend to be for this type of crime. Here are the conflicts of interest that we can identify with the judge in question. That's the micro question. The macro question is, if you determine that a judge has personal connections to a case and that those personal connections may have influenced something like sentencing, which can literally ruin someone's life, right? The difference between one sentence and another for a particular action or crime can determine the future fate of someone's life. Shouldn't the judge maybe be removed, right? Like the judges are supposed to be neutral, sort of unbiased interpreters of the law, period. They're not supposed to bring their personal views or circumstances to the sentences that they apply. If you steal $5,000, your punishment in total could end up being well more than $5,000, right? Between the restitution of the money you stole, legal fees, court fines, lost wages, prison time and the time that you're not going to be able to work, whatever. The idea that if a judge gives a bogus sentence because they were impartial and biased, they were partial and biased rather, the idea that the only repercussion is you cancel the sentence and then nothing happens to the judge, that's ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. And we really need to be taking seriously this idea that if indeed judges are doing this, it has to be more than just, oops, let the people out of prison and otherwise let the judge continue as before. There has to be more done, and I'm not sure how you do it because of the legal infrastructure, at least in the United States, around the impeachment, sanctioning, and removal of judges. Send me your thoughts. I want to hear from you about this. I'm on Twitter at dpacman. The show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show. Big program today. It's maybe one of the best Friday shows in at least a week.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Scott Lardizabal, or Lardizabal. I assume I'm not getting the last name right, but I'm pretty confident on Scott. Scott, thank you for being a David Pakman Show member. Also want to say thanks to Stephen Winicky, who is today's longtime member of the day, sustaining the show since 2013, more than 5 years. Scott, Stephen, thanks to both of you. Join them as members at www.joinpakman.com. 40% off coupon code available only for the next month. It's over once the midterm elections happen. Vote soon 18.
What, 4 weeks minus 3 days?
Something like that.
3.5 weeks?
Yeah, good. Maybe you can get us a report on exactly how long we have left after the show, because I keep forgetting and I get confused in the moment. Let's go to the phone, 617-830-4750. We are going to start with our caller from the 703 area code. 703, go ahead.
Hey, David.
Hey, who's this?
Hi, this is Jack from Northern Virginia.
Go ahead, Jack. What's on your mind?
All right, I wanted to talk, see what you thought about this new Amazon $15 minimum wage increase thing going on. Because I saw that Bernie kind of gave Bezos and Amazon in general a lot of praise for raising the minimum wage there. But I think in this situation, the rhetoric kind of needs to be a little bit different around that. I think he needs to be careful giving praise to Bezos, just because I don't think that his intention, regardless of whether or not it's the right policy, it is only one company.
Right.
And he's really only doing it, I think, for, to save face. And I think by giving too much praise to Bezos, he's kind of setting himself up for something, down the line. And I saw the video that you guys posted on your channel, that other gentleman who was filling in for you and his thoughts about it. And I just think my main takeaway is if, we're already seeing that, of course, what Bezos had to do and what Amazon had to do is they had to go and cut, some of the other benefits in order to account for this wage increase.
Had to or chose to, Jack? I think a key question is they had to or they chose to, because they didn't really have to. You could take a little bit of it, out of the executives, and you don't have to, but they chose to, I think, is the key.
Yeah, you're right. That's what I mean. They didn't have to. They could absolutely afford to have kept those benefits on the table, but of course, what a corporation's going to do is they're going to try to maximize their profits at any cost, and so in order to adjust that wage increase, of course, the first thing he did is he's going to cut the other benefits. So I think giving too much credit to Bezos and Amazon is setting Bernie up to, I don't think his intentions are bad, but I do think that other people might portray it as, kind of short-sighted. Yeah,
listen, I mean, this is similar to with universal basic income, okay, which is it deserves the praise that it deserves and not more than that. If it was more common that there was a $15 minimum wage at small businesses and also at these massive corporations, there wouldn't be a PR benefit to Amazon announcing we are now going to pay $15 an hour, because that would just be what everybody pays, and there's no PR value to it whatsoever. So it's the initial correct decision, which you accurately point out. It deserves credit in saying Amazon is choosing to do this, but they don't have to do it right now. But why are they doing it? It's not just or exclusively for the welfare of the employees. It's because right now, because it's so uncommon, there's a PR benefit to it. And of course, on the back end, they're going to save money elsewhere. Your instinct is, with universal basic income, there's a lot of these tech billionaires who say we need universal basic income. Is it the right policy? I think it is. But you also have to consider that when the average person gets some additional basic income, a lot of that money is going to be spent back on Amazon, where people get a lot of their stuff, their day-to-day stuff, on Amazon Prime, 100 million households or however many are members. So just because something might be self-serving doesn't mean it's not the right policy, but just because it's the right policy, we shouldn't ignore the fact that there's a context in which these decisions are being made, which could be for self-serving reasons as well.
Right, absolutely. I pretty much agree with everything. And just to add real quick, I also feel like this could actually set up the Republicans to do a cynical play here where they can say, oh, look, we raised the $15, we raised that for them. But look what happened as a result. They lose these benefits. And somehow I could see them trying to spin that into a, look, this is the fault of the wage increase and not of, Amazon doing whatever they can to make sure that they make up for that, hit to their
bottom line. Yeah, they will do that. I mean, you're right.
Exactly,
They absolutely will do that. Jack, thank you so much for the call. Really appreciate it. Great to hear from you. We are taking calls at 617-830-4750. Let's go next to our caller from the 323 area code. 323, tell us who you are, where you're calling from.
Hi, David. I'm calling from Amsterdam, actually, but from Los Angeles. And my question is maybe not the most relevant, but I've been wanting to ask you this for a while. Mm-hmm. It's regarding Hillary Clinton, of all things.
Okay.
And I'm sure you're aware, as everyone is, it's really a prevalent idea that she was, in the election, just one of two evils. And, yeah, Trump was bad, but she was also bad. And she's corrupt and all this. And I've noticed on your show, I watch your show quite a bit, and it seems like you were advocating for her over Trump, but yet not really that supportive of her. And but yet I haven't really quite seen specific criticisms. And I just wanted to ask you if you could list out maybe your top criticisms of her for why you are not excited about her as a presidential candidate.
So listen, I want to correct one thing. I was completely clearly saying you should vote for Hillary Clinton in the general election. Like, there was no hesitation whatsoever. So my main critiques of Hillary Clinton, and I won't go to like a sub-bulleted list because it's almost 2 years past the election at this point, but her economic policy is way too far to the right for me, right? So the pulling teeth nature of just even getting her to come around on some minimum wage increases, on her college idea, which was still not what Bernie Sanders' was, on healthcare. She's just economically to the right of me. She also, on foreign policy, is well to the right of me. And I didn't find her to be genuine. So, I mean, those are very like overarching things, and we could break those down further. But I think that the most important question about Hillary Clinton right now is, consider all of the areas that we were warned about Hillary, where actually Trump's the guy we have to be concerned with, right? What's going to happen to the middle class? Well, look at Trump's tax cut and the disaster that it is. Hillary's going to get us into a bunch of wars. Trump was asking about invading Venezuela, right? And most importantly, the Supreme Court. No one, even if you felt that Hillary and Trump overlapped 90%, which I would argue they didn't, but even if you really felt that there was just not a significant difference, who can argue that Hillary Clinton would have taken the two Supreme Court picks so far and appointed for life people like Neil Gorsuch and in particular Brett Kavanaugh? So I think that is really the more interesting Hillary Clinton story today in 2018.
Would you say that she's not genuine, though? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I feel as though all we get from Hillary Clinton are the political ideas that she most recently got the impression would help her win an election or win votes. I don't really feel as though what we get from Hillary Clinton are her personally held positions on issues.
I see, okay. And if I could just throw in one quick second question, do you think that Ben Shapiro is a good example of a conservative show host that is as genuine and intellectually honest of a person that you can get on the conservative side? Or who would be an example for you if you're going to listen to David Pakman and someone on the conservative side? Who do you think is most intellectually honest person to listen to? And would you think Ben Shapiro
This
would
is
fit
so
that
dangerous for me to say yes to, because intellectually honest and argues in good faith are not exactly the same thing. And I don't know the answer to that. I really don't know the answer to that. I'd have to think about it before I say, that's a big declaration to say the most intellectually honest person on the right is Ben Shapiro. I'm certainly not ready to say that today. But I appreciate
Well,
hearing
is
from our
there
viewers
anyone-
in Amsterdam. I do have to move on. A lot of people holding, but I do appreciate the call. 617-830-4750. Let's go next to our caller from the 845 area code. Caller from 845, go ahead.
Hey, this is Mark.
Hey, Mark, go ahead.
All right, as a, what's called, the first one's going to be a quickie. Roaming millennial is actually Asian.
What do you mean
but
actually Asian?
Oh, she's actually mixed, now that I think about it. But
Okay,
you
but what
were
is that?
talking
What's the
about
context?
that on
Like,
your
so
show at some point.
you've identified the race of someone, but what's the context or relevance of that?
Oh, sorry about that. That's my bad. You commented once about you talking to a white supremacist or something along those lines.
Oh yeah. Well, from what I saw, so I thought that roaming millennial, who I might be on a panel with at Politicon, was a white nationalist, but I've since been told she's not. But you know, you can be Asian and and advocate for white nationalism anyway. You know.
Fair point.
Okay, fair enough.
But my actual question is actually, how do you research something that is kind of rife with conspiracies and not kind of get pulled in? Is my actual question, because I listen to really, really good economists, but the things they believe, like the Hillary Clinton stuff and the towers, besides those, crazy conspiracies like those, they're very accurate on things that are happening, economic.
Okay, but wait, hold on a second, Mark. Let me see if I may here.
Oh, sorry.
Who's a really good economist that believes that 9/11 was an inside job or whatever?
One of them is Rogue News. They used to be called Rogue Money, the podcast. Another one is...
But who are the economists?
Well, he goes by the pseudonym of the Gorilla.
So economist Steve the Gorilla believes in 9/11 conspiracies, but on economics he's really good. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like he's very competent at what he's very competent, but the stuff he believes is questionable at best, and I don't feel like looking into it because I don't want to get pulled into, that kind of madness. And I'm not
other than
well-versed in
Steve the
researching those
Gorilla,
kind of things.
who's another really good economist that believes conspiracy theories in other areas?
Another one is, and I don't know their names to be fair, but
or like where could we hear them? What show are they on?
Their channels, their YouTube channels. The Shotgun Economics, and there's another one. I think the LaRouche tack as well.
Oh, LaRouche is no. So you got to get that. That stuff will rot your brain. Okay, so the LaRouche. What's the guy's name? It's I forget the guy's first name. Is it Lyndon LaRouche? Yeah. Listen. If you can I promise you, Mark, you can very easily find good economists who don't go by names like Steve the Gorilla and don't also believe 9/11 conspiracy theories, and then you won't even have this problem of having to figure out. They sound so smart about economics, but they think 9/11 was an inside job. You can find economists where it's
smart,
just one.
It's more like accurate. Sorry. They're relatively accurate. I listen to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Other than them, it's just that they're one of the accurate ones when it comes to certain factors in the economy. I'm not saying that they're the greatest thing that ever was.
You can find left-wing economists like Richard Wolff. You can find right-wing economists like Thomas Sowell. They're not going to touch 9/11 conspiracy. They're not going to touch New World Order. Like, there's just lots of people. I don't think you need to deal with Steve the Gorilla for economic advice. Mark, I appreciate the call. Thank you so much. Great to hear from you. 617-830-4750. Let's go to our next caller from the 513 area code. Caller from 513. Go ahead.
Hello?
That's you. Yeah, who's this?
My name is John.
Okay, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I was just wondering why you think Bernie Sanders identifies as a democratic socialist instead of a social democrat. Does he just not know? I mean, I know there's a lot of confusion because a lot of even Scandinavian countries call themselves democratic socialist countries, but they really are social democracies.
Yeah.
I think
Does
it's
Bernie
important to be
actually
very
say?
clear
Does
about
does,
who
does
we are
Bernie
and what
still
we
say
stand
he's?
for.
Does Bernie
If not,
still?
Republicans can play office.
Sorry, what was your question?
Oh, I was just wondering why you think Bernie Sanders identifies as a democratic socialist instead of social democrat.
I'm not sure that he still does. Like, do you know, Pat? Does Bernie still say I am a democratic socialist?
Not
or-
as much as he used to, but I
Yeah.
think he does, because he talks about how he's a socialist, but he's a democratic socialist, so there's a big difference there. I think he does still identify as one.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the case, then he's adding to the confusion. You know, if he is saying, I mean,
Yeah.
now it's also possible that Bernie actually is a true socialist, but with regard to how he works as a senator, he may be advocating for social democracy because really the policies that he's proposed, Medicare for all and the college education plan and minimum wage, those are more indicative of social democracy than socialism. So he may well be an actual socialist, but you're right that he's mostly advocating for policies of social democracy.
Well, all right, then I just have a quick second question. If
Yeah.
you ever had Bernie Sanders on, would you ask him why he identifies as a democratic socialist
Yes, I would.
every now and then?
I would.
All right, thank you.
Okay,
That's it.
thank you. Appreciate the call. If you're holding, please don't hang up. We're going to take a quick break and get right back to the phones after this. Don't hang up if you're holding. We're taking more calls.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Let's go back to the phones at 617-830-4750. Let's talk to our caller from the 804 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
Yes, that's you. Who's this?
Okay. This is Cassie.
Okay.
It's not so much a question that I have to ask you, but it's just an observation.
Okay.
A while back when this all started, everything was so uncomfortable. I have quite a few Republican friends.
Yeah.
And they started to act real strange. And these weren't just acquaintances. We've gone on vacation, everything. And here lately, it's like they're cracking.
Okay, Cassie, if I may, can I ask just a couple questions so that I know exactly what you're talking about? When you say when this all started, what do you mean?
Well, what I mean is when, well, number one, I never identified that they were for Trump in the first place. Because we never
Cassie,
had
let me see
that
if
kind of rapport.
I think we're getting to something really interesting. But what I just want to know, when you said when this all started, do you mean when Trump started running for president?
When Trump first
Hillary.
came out to go for president.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. When
Okay,
when
I'm
Trump
sorry.
first
I'm so
became
sorry.
a candidate, when Trump, Cassie, hold on. Let me
They
talk you
never
through it. I think I can help if I
let's
talk
put
you
this-
through
Put
it.
it this way.
Just to let-
they never
yeah.
expressed any of that.
Who didn't express what, Cassie?
The friends.
They didn't express what? That they support Trump?
They didn't express that they supported Trump.
Okay. How do you know that
At
they
the
do?
beginning.
How do you know that they do?
Well, it was never. It's a certain talk they do.
Okay.
There's a certain type of talk.
Oh,
soon
okay.
as soon as his nomination started,
Yep.
then all of a sudden we need a businessman for president.
Right.
And it just came out of the blue. We had
Sure.
just came from the beach for a week, and I was like, "What the?" I was just shocked. I was like, "Cause I know that rhetoric.
Okay.
I've heard it before.
Right.
I've heard it on the job.
Really?
Yeah, I heard it. Look, let me tell you something, David.
Please.
Let me tell you something. This talk started way back. This is nothing new.
Which talk, though? Needing a businessman for president?
No, this talk that the Republicans are doing.
What are they saying?
This started with. I'm much older than you.
That's okay.
No. I'm not apologizing.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying to you when maybe I'm not getting it across. What I'm trying. Let's just break it down. I'm trying to say is that when they started out so strong.
Yeah.
In the Trump.
Who did?
Crap. I'll put it that way. They were steadfast.
Your friends?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was like they turned into these people. We're two different races, but it never...
Who's two different races? You and Trump, or you and I, or you and your friends?
The Trump voters, my friends that are Trump voters, they're all white.
Okay, gotcha.
I'm African American.
Gotcha.
And we've been friends over 15 years. That's how long it went back. In 15 years of going on vacation and doing everything together,
yeah,
there was never anything.
Are they often on drugs during vacations?
On what?
Do they take any drugs during vacation?
No.
Okay.
No, dear, they don't.
Well, so that's not
They
the
don't.
explanation that I think we can say.
My point is this.
Yeah.
My point, because I think we're getting lost in the translation,
I think
or
so.
else my translation is getting lost. What I'm trying to say is his hold on, and these are educated people.
Sure.
We all went to college, master's degree, all that. And these aren't dumb people.
Sure.
Okay, academic-wise.
Book smarts.
And they're not clueless to different races.
They're aware of race.
But, say that again?
They're aware of race.
Yes, they're aware of everything. They've been around all kind of people. We're all everywhere. Here, there, everywhere. But he sparked a fear.
Yep.
He sparked
Absolutely.
a fear
Absolutely.
in them.
Cassie, I couldn't have said it better myself. Really appreciate the call. I do have to move on, and I do hope to
let
speak
me
to
say
you
this
again.
real
Very,
quick.
very interesting. And listen, these are issues that everybody's dealing with. I don't know how else to say it, but I totally understand what she's referring to. 650 area code. Let's go to our caller from 650. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, David. This is Adam from San Francisco.
Go ahead, Adam.
So I think the upcoming elections are definitely going to be a litmus test of sorts on whether the country is going to swing back from one side of populism, from the right to left.
Agree.
So my question to you is the country ready to swing to another, progressive or another populist ideology? Or from what Trump has given us in the last 2 years or so, perhaps the country's like, okay, we've tried and tested it. Let's swing back to the center.
Excellent question. The country has been ready for a long time to make a big move to the left. The problem is, number one, a lot of those people who are ready aren't voting. Okay, so voter turnout is embarrassingly low. 2/3 or more of Americans think the government has a responsibility to provide at least a basic level of health care to everybody, regardless of ability to pay. Where are those people on election day? They're not all voting, right? So I think the answer is yes, the country is more than ready to go to the left, particularly after these 2 atrocious years of Trump. But most people don't vote in midterms. A lot of people aren't politically engaged, and our elected officials don't reflect the positions of their constituents. And so will the country actually make a big move to the left in 3.5 weeks on election day? I don't know, but the country is definitely more than ready. It's just people aren't going out and actually making it happen.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, no problem. Thank you for the call. Appreciate it. 617-830-4750. Let's try our caller from the 719 area code. Caller from 719. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, David. This is Jacob calling from Trinidad, Colorado.
Go ahead, Jacob.
I have 2 questions related to money and politics.
Okay.
First, do you think that Citizens United was wrongly decided, and if you do, you think that a constitutional amendment should be passed to overturning it, assuming it was possible.
Okay, so I do believe Citizens United was the wrong decision. I think it's a destructive and horrible decision. Before the appointment and confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh, I probably would have been of the mindset, I was of the mindset, that there are cleaner paths towards the effective removal of Citizens United than a constitutional amendment, because that's such an uphill battle. With the confirmation of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh and the continued radicalization of the Supreme Court, I'm actually now almost swinging back to, and I think Cenk from the Young Turks may have said something along these lines, I'm almost back to maybe the constitutional amendment is actually the most likely path forward. I don't think it's likely, but it might be more likely than getting Supreme Court rulings that will effectively overturn Citizens United. So I think we're in trouble. I think neither path is particularly likely now, but I would support a constitutional amendment.
Okay, I guess just to follow up if I can.
Yeah.
Do you think that the goal should be to make money from corporations and the rich meaningless as a political tool rather than banning it altogether? Because I do think that maybe there is a potential free speech element to contributing to political campaigns.
Well, you're very quickly, if you want to go to free speech route, the question is money speech? If it is speech, then should there be unequal amounts of speech when it comes to influencing elections? Because if you believe in one person, one vote, all of a sudden, if money is speech and there's no limits, not everybody has the same amount of influence. And I think that that presents a different sort of legal argument. But I think that the sort of more interesting angle here that you bring up is, are there ways to make the money irrelevant? I don't actually know if there are. I think that the most direct path is you say we have a set amount of financing for elections. It's public financing. There's a set amount. There's a set period. We don't start earlier and earlier every election cycle. And you sort of make everything uniform, because uniformity in that way, we don't always want. I don't know too many people arguing for equality of outcome. But if you set up elections with equal opportunity, meaning everybody gets the same amount of money, the same amount of time, that in and of itself would be a huge improvement. I don't know how you make the money meaningless. I don't know how you do that.
All right. Well, thank you for taking my call.
Thank you for calling in. Appreciate it. Campaign finance, very important issue. 617-830-4750. You know, I'm going to go to Ari. Ari, last time he called in, had a question about Iran and Russia, and we sort of mixed it up together. And I'm wondering what's on Ari's mind today. Ari, go ahead if that's you.
Hi, David. Thanks for taking my call. Actually, going a different route today, talking about.
Yeah,
I was
please.
curious what your take is generally on the open borders argument, because from my perspective, philosophically, I agree with the idea that, people should not be confined to, their area, especially if they're in, danger and all that type of stuff. And there's a lot of libertarian economists actually are proponents of it. But it seems to me that we're not at a time in history where it seems to be feasible without there being sort of a lot of chaos. And I was just curious because ideally if there was a situation where the West completely opened up its borders, then obviously, there's a rise of right-wing nationalism in a lot of these countries.
Okay, so Ari, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this, Ari. When you say open borders could mean a bunch of different things. Sometimes when people say open borders, they mean you still literally have a border and border crossings and immigration, but anyone who wants to move to the U.S. is allowed to move to the U.S. If you want to live here, there's no process, but you've got to just tell us. You tell us, I want to go live in the U.S., and you're allowed to come in. That's one version of open borders. Another is literally there is no border or immigrations and customs enforcement at all. Like it's a completely uncontrolled border. Which do you mean by open borders?
I think you're the former that you mentioned, essentially more looser policy, I guess.
Okay.
As opposed to just,
So listen. I believe in the sovereignty of countries. I think that there are some interesting arguments to be made, which are sort of libertarian-esque, but they actually kind of go back to humans in a state of nature, like pre-modern society, where you can just say anybody who wants to go can go, everybody's allowed in, there's no restrictions, just anybody who wants to come. I don't think it's practical. I just don't. And I think that there's a sort of ideological argument, which is, wouldn't that be nice, or what would that would be a great philosophical thing. I just simply, some people say I'm overly pragmatic. It's just not going to work. So I'm okay. I'm not an advocate of open borders in the way that you're describing. What I do think is problematic is when we have racially tinged or in other ways politically discriminatory policies that reinforce some of the same inequalities that we claim to be trying to fix. That's what I have a problem with. But I'm not an open borders guy.
Yeah, gotcha. I have the same feeling. It's philosophically, ideally it would be a nice idea, but it doesn't seem to me that it could anyway work. Unless we get to a point maybe this in the future where, circumstances are different. But I don't see it working anytime. In
the current circumstances, I think what I'm saying is it's not practical. Ari, great to hear from you. I think Ari and I were in a kind of like an argument last time he called in, if I recall
it got
correctly.
pretty tense, I remember.
It did get
but
tense.
This was a lot more cordial.
It did go well. We have time for one more quick call. I'm going to go to the 916 area code. Caller from 916. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name is Damore from Sacramento.
All right, go ahead, Damore.
All right, so my question is about the James Damore memo. I know you did an interview with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my question is basically, what did you think about the contents of the memo? He had a thesis about, average personality differences between men and women, and this may be affecting their numerical representation in the technology sector.
Right.
So I was wondering if you thought this was a sort of a plausible hypothesis for why women are underrepresented in the tech sector.
I'm open to exploring that. I think it's perfectly fine to explore when it was Larry Summers who said, hey, it's possible that there's fewer women in math because there's some kind of brain predisposition towards math for men and away from math for women. Like, I'm open to that. I don't think it's inherently problematic to ask that. James Damore's memo in particular was extraordinarily poorly cited. Like, I think you would admit, Delmar, that he wasn't claiming to have done any of the underlying research for the claims himself, right? He was citing research that others had done. Would you grant me that?
Yeah, I would grant that.
Okay.
He wasn't doing the research himself. Yeah.
Sure. So, and if you grant that, then would you grant that it's really important to check the citations and the research that he is pointing to? Would you grant me that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, if you found that a bunch of his citations went to pages that didn't exist on the internet, would that make you question the conclusions that he comes to?
Yeah, that would definitely make me question his conclusions.
It would. And if you clicked on some of the citations and some of them went to papers, but you weren't finding in the papers where the research justified his conclusion, would that make you question his conclusions?
Sorry, I didn't catch that. Could you repeat that one?
If you went and read some of the citations, some of the works that he cited, and it didn't seem as though the conclusions he reached actually were supported by the cited work, would that be a cause of concern for you?
Yeah, definitely. That would make me question his rigor and his reasoning.
There you go. So my problem with James Damore was that when you actually look at the cited work and how he came to his conclusions, it was very poor. You had a combination of citing works that didn't actually support his conclusions and straight up links that didn't go anywhere. So am I open to the argument that he was making? Absolutely. Do I think that he's the guy to be writing the memo? Probably not.
Okay, so in that case, my sort of follow-up question would be, so if you think that his memo was basically poorly argued, even though the argument is not necessarily inherently offensive, basically is poorly arguing for a plausible idea, is that grounds for being terminated at a company like Google? Should that be grounds for being terminated?
I have no idea. That's Google's decision to make. But I think you're making one mistake, which is I said that I don't think there's anything inherently wrong or offensive with exploring the question that James Damore was asking. You said it's a plausible argument, and that those are sort of two different things. Is it offensive to explore a proposition versus is it plausible, likely, or certain? I think those are two different things. But you know what? Let me ask you one other thing. Are you still really, like, is the James Damore memo still a big thing for you at this point? Like, is that something you're focused on significantly?
No, not really. I just thought it was just an interesting episode, and it sort of revealed a lot. It sort of led into and related to a lot of questions about, political correctness and what do we consider offensive, and there's the thesis that people on the right tend to say that political correctness. What's wrong with it is that it stops us from being able to have open inquiry, and people on the left tend to say that political correctness is just about being inclusive and it's totally benign.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if the verdict on this question would allow us to make a judgment about whether the right-wing story about political correctness or the left-wing story about political correctness is more correct.
No, I don't think James Damore's memo would adjudicate political correctness, big picture. Damore, I got to go. Appreciate the call very much. Sorry to everybody that I didn't get to. We will take calls again next week.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Audience questions, they're still here, and they are stronger than ever by audience demand. We proposed maybe scrapping audience questions. Furious audience members demanded that they remain, and we are obliging.
Yeah, and I'm happy now. I took audience questions for granted all these years, and knowing that they're here to stay, man, that makes me feel happy.
Right. No, that's you seem totally sincere and honest and genuine when you said that. I really appreciate that, Pat. Let's get into the first question. David, what should the sentence be for fake rape allegations? Listen, if you're asking me exactly what the sentence should be in terms of a punishment, the law already says what it should be, and we'll get back to that in a second. But I've been reading a lot about criminology lately, and we often talk about deterrent effects of criminal law. And an example of the debate that exists there is you deter people from committing murder if you have the death penalty as a possibility versus just having life in prison. A potential murderer is less likely to commit a murder if they know they might get death penalty instead of life in prison. No evidence of that. Yep. Okay? What the studies suggest is that what really serves as a deterrent of crime, assuming that the punishment is strict enough, right? Like if the punishment for murder was a year in prison, it's not going to work as a deterrent. What the studies show is a good deterrent is a strict enough potential punishment, but a high likelihood of getting caught, okay? So if people believe that if they murder someone, it's likely, relatively likely, what the percentage is, it doesn't matter, but they need to believe that it's likely that the police will catch them and they will be prosecuted and potentially be found guilty for the murder. That's what works as a deterrent to get people not to murder. If you are of the mindset that it's less likely that you will be caught, that will drastically increase someone's propensity to murder. Death penalty versus life in prison doesn't seem to have a huge impact. So when it comes to the sentence for fake rape allegations, I am very open to a relatively broad range of sentences. Some people say it's got to be a felony, but it doesn't have to have the same sentence as the rapist would have gotten. Other people say, no, listen, if you make a fake rape allegation, you should be sentenced as if you had committed the rape and were found guilty about it. There's a range there. The important thing is the person who's going to make a fake rape allegation needs to feel as though it's likely they will get caught and punished. The exact punishment is less important as long as it's serious enough. Do people feel as though if they make fake rape allegations, they are likely to get caught? I genuinely don't know the answer. Those fake allegations are relatively rare.
Yeah, I think so, because what do you get out of that? I mean, is it some attention that you're trying to seek out? Is it that you are enemies with this person and you want to lock them up? I think it happens very few and far between. What the sentence should be, I don't know, maybe 20% of what the accused rapist would get, something like that. So if they were to be locked away for 10 years, you get 2 years. If they were to be locked away for, my math's gonna get tough here, but 5 years, you get 6 months, something like that. 1 year.
Am I being overly punitive if I say that feels a little bit low to me?
20%.
If you can, by your virtue of a lie, put someone at risk of spending 20 years in prison, if you made it up, you should only get 4. I mean, I just don't know. I'm just not sure about that. But again, you got at an interesting thing, which is why might someone make a fake rape allegation? Obviously, we're not talking here about misidentification. We're talking about genuine, just I accuse someone I know didn't really do it. It can be a personal vendetta against someone. It can be mental illness. It can be misplaced trauma. Something did happen to you and you pick someone out and that's who you're going to blame knowingly. Although, again, these are very rare phenomena. And really, the problem for me is way too few actual rapists end up being convicted. That's the real problem, both from lack of reporting and from the sometimes inherent difficulties of proving some of those cases. So the sentence for fake rape allegations must be sufficiently high that it is somewhat of a deterrent. And most importantly, people need to feel that it's likely that if they make a fake allegation, they're going to get caught. That is a really good deterrent for people committing a certain crime or participating in a certain act. Send me your thoughts if you have something more specific in mind. Hey, David, in light of the Brett Kavanaugh fiasco, should it simply not be up to the president to nominate Supreme Court justices? We've been asked about Supreme Court justice appointment processes in the past, but I think that this takes on a very particular tone, given that it's Donald Trump and it's serial accused sex assaulter and totally unhinged perjurer, Brett Kavanaugh, in this particular case. I can come up with a whole bunch of other ways that we could determine who becomes the next Supreme Court the next Supreme Court justice that don't involve the president saying, here's who I nominate, and the Senate saying, we either vote to confirm or we don't. There are all sorts of things we could come up with. Public votes of different kinds. A campaign of sorts. It doesn't matter, but I want to make a different point. I would be okay with the president continuing to appoint Supreme Court justices, judges, they become justices. They don't actually have to be judges, but typically they are. I would be much more okay with the system we have where the president just gets to pick because it is in a way simple. Simple's not always the best. If, and here's the most important thing, we had term limits on the Supreme Court such that it was predictable and scheduled how many Supreme Court justices each presidential term has assigned to it and when it takes place. Because think about that for a second. A lot of the problems we have right now are Obama had the opportunity to appoint someone, Merrick Garland. It was the last year of his presidency, and Republicans, to their credit, successfully held it up with the idea that we want to hear from the people first before we make any appointments for life. We want to hear from the people first. And they were able to delay that. We now have a situation where Anthony Kennedy was involved in negotiations. He wanted to make sure that it would be Kavanaugh or someone else from his list that was going to get selected. So he ended up making a deal to leave now instead of maybe after Donald Trump is out of office, for example. We solve a lot of these problems and make it much simpler and cleaner if we say, hey, 9 justices, they each get 12-year terms, meaning that eventually, I think that means if you do it on a rolling basis, every presidential term, I don't know what the math is.
You can 3 or whatever.
You would make the math work. And that way, you know, listen, this election is important not because 4 Supreme Court justices might retire or might die or might make a deal. It's we know that 2 Supreme Court justices are going to be replaced in the next term. The next president is going to get 2 of those appointments. We know which ones they are. And that way, voters know, okay, well, let's see. 2 liberal Supreme Court justices are going to be hitting they're going to be maxing out and are going to be replaced. It's extra important if we don't want the court to move to the right to not vote for a Republican in this particular election. That would be a much better solution.
Yeah, I like this approach, especially because it has way too much to do with luck right now.
Yes.
Like Bush got 2 appointees, Obama got 2, should have got 3, but he got 2. Trump's 2 years into his presidency. He already has 2 appointees. Like, how is that fair? How is that democratic?
Absolutely.
And also, this approach is better because it doesn't blow up the entire balance of power that we have.
Right.
So, like, when it has to do with, when you talk about legislation, legislative branch writes and passes the bill, the executive branch signs it, and the judiciary holds up whether or not it's constitutional.
Sure.
The check that the executive branch currently has on the judicial branch is that the president picks the Supreme Court justices.
Yes.
So electing them or having Congress choose them, I think it would just kind of shake up the balance of power, and I don't necessarily want to do that if we don't have to.
It would be a much more serious upending of what we have than simply saying there are term limits and the justices are on a schedule and we know exactly who's retiring when, because that's when they hit the end of their term. Send me your thoughts if you have other ideas about this. Hey, David, if Brett Kavanaugh had been accused of attempted murder by 2 to 3 women, would Republicans still have confirmed him? You know, it's an interesting question because it makes me think back to when Donald Trump said I could shoot people on Fifth Avenue and I would still not lose any supporters. Here's the thing. Let's grant that attempted murder is a worse crime than attempted sexual assault. Maybe people in the audience disagree, but for our conversation and sort of implicit in the question is the idea that attempted murder is a worse crime than attempted sexual assault. Would Republicans still have confirmed him? I almost think it would have been easier because they would have said, hold on a second. You're telling me he tried to kill people and there's no police report and there's no this and then there's no that? With sexual assault, we know why we often have incidents unreported. Because of stigma, because of fear, because of shame, because of embarrassment, because of the expectation that you're not going to be believed, because of the expectation that the person won't be held accountable because so many aren't. With attempted murder, it's much harder to make the case as to why it was never actually reported to police or anything like that. So I actually, it's an interesting question because the question goes to, is there anything Republicans wouldn't have ignored to just push this guy through, no matter how horrible? But in a sense, I feel like it would have been easier to write off.
Yeah, I think it would be easier too, but for a different reason. When it comes to attempted rape, attempted sexual assault, there's never any reason or excuse for that. But murder, I mean, maybe they could come up with something that at a visceral level we would sympathize with Kavanaugh
or self-defense.
For attempting. Yeah, it was self-defense, or this person screwed them from a financial standpoint or from a personal standpoint, and they would be able to make that emotional appeal to the voters, and they would get around it a little bit easier.
In fact, imagine that the circumstances were that Brett Kavanaugh was involved in some kind of love triangle. Not a devil's one necessarily, but just
that's a drinking game.
A triangle, that's a drinking game anyway. A triangle of some kind. And the other dude in the triangle came to Brett Kavanaugh and attacked him. And Brett Kavanaugh responded, he didn't kill the guy, but he responded with strong enough force that it could colloquially be called attempted murder. You think Republicans are going to shut the guy down when he says, listen, this guy came after me. I did take my gun out. I did fire the gun as the guy ran away. I didn't hit him. Yeah, you could call it attempted murder, but it was in self-defense. That's ultimately what it was. Not a single Republican votes against him for that. Not a single Republican. No question about it. Interesting question, but I actually think in some way it would have made it easier for Brett Kavanaugh to be confirmed. Sadly, that's sort of the situation that we're in. That is it for this week, other than the bonus show. Very solid audience questions this week. I'm feeling kind of good about reviving audience questions.
There was a resurgence, I think.
There really is. There really is. Keep sending yours in. I got a lot of bad ones, I will admit. But we did get some good ones as well. So keep sending them in, and we will work in the good ones. We've got a great bonus show for you today. Google Plus is getting shut down. Global temperatures may be connected with mental health issues, and we will also talk about a restraining order against extremist, very aggressive vegan activists outside of a Berkeley, California Whole Foods store. We will get immediate reaction from vegan producer Pat and much more. www.joinpacman.com. Become a patron to access the bonus show at patreon.com/David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.